Welcome back. Wednesday, halfway through week 2. You're doing a great job. Keep going. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, as always this week, it's going to be largely about focus. It's largely about focus, right? What we're doing right now, the really important work we're doing right now is really about shifting perspective. We're moving from unconscious eating into much more conscious eating. And this is a very, very important distinction. As we've already talked about, the question really comes up, why am I eating this particular food? You know, as a good example, if you eat a piece of broccoli, why do you eat it? Do you eat it because it tastes ever so good, or do you eat it because you perceive that it's good for you? What's the motivation behind eating a piece of broccoli? On the other hand, what's the motivation behind eating a chocolate chip cookie? Assuming you eat the occasional chocolate chip cookie. I know many of you don't. What's the motivation behind eating a piece of marzipan? What's the motivation behind drinking a Coke? When we really dig in and figure out consciously why we're really doing something, here's one of the magical things that can happen. When you realize that some of the foods you're eating are designed to fill an emotional void, you begin to recognize that you can come up with strategies for filling that emotional void through better means. For example, do you remember the example of the little kid falls, skins their knee, right? Mom comes up, hugs and kisses chocolate chip cookie. Child creates a relationship in their head at that point, a meaning or a set of rules that a chocolate chip cookie is equal to love. That's a problem, right? That's a challenge. Once you begin to recognize at 45, 35, 25, 55, 65 years old that that chocolate chip cookie has absolutely nothing to do with love, then you begin to realize the reason you might be eating that cookie is because in that moment, you were feeling a little low on love. You were feeling a little disconnected. And that somehow your wiring has set you up to believe that eating that cookie is going to fill that void. So what I want to suggest to you is that when you notice which emotion you're satisfying with that food, what I want you to do is think to yourself, how else could I satisfy this emotion? For example, in the case of the chocolate chip cookie, who could I call right now? Who could I call and tell them I love them? Who could I call that just the sound of their voice would fill my being with a sense of love and connection? Who should I call that maybe, just maybe, by having a little phone call with them, the desire for the cookie might go away? So when a food comes along and there's some level of you that believes that that food is going to create an emotional state in you, what I'm going to ask you to do is to think to yourself, how else might I be able to create that emotional state instead of that food? With one tricky proviso. You have to then still have the food, right? Because we're not making any changes this week. And on that note, what begins to happen today for a lot of people is they start getting irritated that they have to eat foods that they're finding themselves not really wanting to have anymore. I know. It begins usually happening today, tomorrow, where there's a food that you would normally have had, but you don't feel like having because you've noticed your dialogue, you noticed the way it makes you feel, you don't really want to have it anymore, and you might even get a little annoyed with me that I'm asking you to still have it. And I'm asking you, please, you trusted me so far, trust me and have it if you would like lasting change. And by the way, when I say lasting change, this does not mean that you will have this food and then never ever have it again. What it means is that if you ever do have it again, it will be conscious. Sure, there are some foods you might want to say goodbye to forever, but there are some foods where really all we're trying to do is help you gain control over that food again, so that when you do eat it, it's through your own conscious choice and not through some unconscious hypnosis from the food industry. So when we're doing this, it's really important. This week, as the shifts happen, you may find yourself not wanting it, not wanting to finish it, not wanting to complete it. Push through and make it happen. Very, very important. You know, I had this client, and I think I shared some of his story before, but I'll go a little more into detail this time. So what happened is that he, first of all, had some real health issues to deal with. Like he was really, really overweight, and to the point that you could just take a look at him and see that there's 20 extra years of life he could have if he could just get rid of all this extra weight. It was serious. And so he came in and did the program. And one of the issues that he discovered was that he had this weird attachment to ice cream. And it was a combination of issues. Ice cream had been used to control him as a child. So, you know, it was a reward when he was well behaved. So he really had to link up to it and so on. And it was also a reward, which meant that he always wanted to reward himself with it. And his anchor to it, his attachment to it was so strong that his wife would say, hey, could you go to the store and pick up some juice for the kids? And then he would come home and he would have ice cream and maybe juice for the kids. And they already had ice cream in the freezer. That's how attached to ice cream he was. Now, what's really interesting about this is that he got to a place where he never wanted to have ice cream again, like ever. Like no special occasion, no excuse, no trigger could make him want to eat it. I can relate to that because I was exactly the same with ice cream. I went to boarding school, and in my boarding school, once a week, we'd be given some canteen money and we'd be allowed to go to the store and buy junk food. And you wanted to get there fast because the ice cream, they sold it in these little half-liter tubs, and it went fast. You wanted to be the first one there to get your tub. And if you got one, it was this huge sense of achievement and power. You got one of the ice creams. And then you'd sit there and eat your bowl of ice cream, like right then and there. And that stuck with me for years. I can tell you today, I have zero temptation to have ice cream of any kind. That's because I know some things about ice cream. I know some things about the way milk is produced and the way cows are treated that ethically makes me never want to go near a dairy product again. And secondly, I know some things about the way ice cream is and the way dairy products are in our body that make me never want to have it again. The challenge is that for Kurt, he knew some of those things and he still wanted to have it until he completed the program by eating the ice cream even when he stopped wanting to have it. For example, one of the things he learned on the program was that in America and also in many countries in the Western world, cows are now suffering frequently, like as many as 1 in 5 of them in the US, with mastitis. Mastitis is a painful udder infection, a painful infection of the mammary glands, okay? We're talking about something that I'm sure at least half of you can really relate to, a really painful infection, and it's antibiotic resistant because they've been treating it with antibiotics forever, and so it just won't go away anymore. And so 1 in 5 cows just have this condition, which means there's an infection in the udder, okay, where the milk is being produced. And so as a result of that infection in the udder, there's pus being released into the milk. And so there's so much of it in there that the government has determined a safe level of pus in the milk. You know, because there's a safe level of pus you should be eating, right? So there's a safe level of pus, but the problem was as this mastitis became more prolific in production cows, the dairy industry, had to then go out to the FDA and apply for an increased white blood cell count. They needed to increase the pus limit in the milk. Yes, milk, it does a body good, right? No, in fact, that's a funny thing, because when I was a kid, there were these ads that were running in Canada and the US, and they said, milk, it does a body good, pass it on. And as I understand the story, advertising standards in various jurisdictions made them take that advertisement off the air because there's no proof whatsoever anywhere that milk does a human body any good at all. And what have they done since then? They switched it. Now they have these ads all over the place that says, got milk? Good for you, right? Legally, there's no problem with that. They're not making any claims. They're not saying milk is good for you. It doesn't say milk is good for you. It just says, got milk? Good for you. You could say, got crack cocaine? Good for you. They're using a trick of psychology because when you read that, you don't read the tone of voice. And the subliminal message is, got milk, it's good for you. Manipulation in the marketing industry is everywhere. Oh, and incidentally, how about this? A baby cow has to grow 1,000 pounds in its first year of life. So the milk is full of all kinds of gorgeous, perfect fats and proteins and hormones designed to help a baby cow grow 1,000 pounds in its first year. Have you noticed any trends happening in the world lately? Does it look to you like there are a few humans that are doing their level best to grow to 1,000 pounds? I mean, I'm kidding around a little bit here, but milk does not do a body good. How about this? How about this? What if I asked you, what if I told you, because this is true, by the way, in Switzerland, there's a restaurant where 70% of the dairy products in the restaurant are made from human milk. In England, there's a place that serves ice cream. It's an ice cream bar, and you can get ice cream, and most of it is made from human milk. How do you react to that? You see, I often share that with big audiences around the world. I might have hundreds or even thousands of people in the audience, and I'll share that fact with them. And here's the look on their face. It goes like this. I go, yeah, and there's this restaurant and this other ice cream place, and 70% of what they produce is made from human milk. And here are the looks I see in the audience. Right? Wait for a second. I want you to think just for a moment. What kind of hypnosis would have to be in place in order for you to think that human milk is gross and milk from a cow is okay? Really? Like, what if I offered you some milk from a dog? Would that be okay? Pig? Would you like some pig milk? Rat milk? That's got to be yummy? No, we've been conditioned heavily for decades that cow's milk is important. In fact, when I first gave up cow's milk, when I first gave it up 20 years ago and told my friends I was giving up cow's milk, they were like, "Oh my God, Eric, wherever will you get your calcium from?" Like we've been getting calcium from milk in the first place, ever, historically. I mean, let's look at our closest cousins in the wild, chimpanzees. Have you ever seen a chimpanzee squatting underneath a wildebeest milking it? Like, no. Now, that's maybe a crazy example, but let's be more realistic. They don't drink dairy milk. And yet, if I were to put a chimpanzee in a room with a bunch of NFL football players and ask those football players to get that chimpanzee into the cage, we'd end up with 5 dead football players, a bunch of guys with broken arms, and a monkey sitting on top of the cage eating a banana because they're so strong. And yet, no milk to build their bones? That's because that's not where we get our calcium from. You see, Kurt learned all this stuff. He learned about the pus that was in the milk. He learned about the hormones, both the artificial ones that we inject and the natural ones that are in there. You know what else he learned? Is that human milk, it's so fascinating, but human milk, it absolutely is schedule dependent. It's schedule dependent. Like the milk that a mother produces in the first few days is different than the next few days. In the first week is different in the second week. Like a human mother makes different milk for the baby at different levels of development. So that leads to a really natural question, and that is, what stage of development was the cow at when it produced your milk? What stage was its calf at? Was it in its first few weeks? Was it its first few months? Milk is so perfectly formulated to the exact stage that that calf needs to be at. In the same way, human milk is perfectly formulated to the exact stage of the baby's development. What I'm really trying to get at here is that as Kurt learned this stuff, as he realized this stuff, his desire for milk started to go away. His desire for ice cream started to go away. But what he did is he forced himself to keep having it. He forced himself, even though as he tasted it, he began to notice this sticky, croupy feeling that he would get in his throat. He never really noticed it before. It was just there. Well, you know what that sticky, croupy thing is it's the body's immune system saying, what the hell is this? And protecting your digestive tract from this stuff that's coming in. And you get all mucus layered here. He noticed all that stuff, but he didn't stop. He continued to have it. And here's how I know it worked. You see, most people, when they go on a willpower strike type diet, and where they're going to use their willpower, they're going to use their strength and their determination, then all they need is some life event to come along and boom, they're back off on the bad habits again. Well, Kurt and I happen to bump into each other. I'm speaking at an event. I'm in Europe, I'm speaking at an event, and I see Kurt in the audience. He's just standing just over there. He's come in late, so I didn't know he was there, and I'm talking about this very topic, and I go, oh my God, Kurt. And here's what I did. I had money in my pocket. I offered him $1,000 in cash to eat ice cream, just one bowl of ice cream, $1,000 in cash, one bowl of ice cream. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. And I want you to think about that. What kind of excuses do we normally need? We normally need, well, it was my friend's birthday, or it was a special office party, or it was Halloween, or it was Christmas, or it was Easter, or it was raining, I had a bad day, I had a really good day, I got fired, I had to fire somebody. And we have all the reasons that can trigger us, and boom, we suddenly want to treat ourselves badly with some kind of food. And he won't even do it for $1,000. That's why today his health is in such incredible form, because he stuck with the program and he pushed through. Even when he stopped wanting to eat cow pus, when he stopped wanting to have all the weird hormones, when he stopped wanting to ingest the perfect nutritional fluid for baby cows instead of humans, even when he wanted to stop, he kept having it and he created lasting change. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would I share all this stuff with you about milk right now when I'm asking you to keep having it? Exactly. Because I want you to have it knowing what you're having, so it stimulates more dialogue, so it stimulates more consciousness, so it stimulates more awareness about what's going on. And so now, as a result of this conversation, you might find that you don't want to have it anymore. You might find that you try to drink some milk, eat some cheese, have some ice cream, chum down some yummy yogurt, and there's a little part of you that might even kick in a bit of a gag reflex. You're like, oh, this came out of a cow. On what basis did I think this was okay? And I want you to have it anyway. And I want you to notice how it really makes you feel. I want you to notice, does it make you feel a little croupy? Does it make you feel a little sleepy? Does it make you feel a little heavy? I want you to really notice it. Pay attention to the dialogue. Notice the way you talk yourself into having it, and then notice how it made you feel. This is ever so important. It's ever so important. And it relates to time. It relates to time in the sense that a lot of times I've heard people talk about like, health advice they've had, ancient health advice. Like a very good friend of mine, it does very entertaining talks about health and nutrition and that kind of stuff. And he talks about the ancient wisdom. Like he refers to, there's a passage in the Bible. It's so old, it's in the Bible. Okay. And then of course we've got Ayurvedic medicine, which I'm actually a really big fan of. And they talk about how ancient Ayurveda is. I mean, wow, it's like 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Okay. Let's put time into perspective for a minute. Our species, Homo sapiens, our species is about 250,000 years old. That's what we believe today, 250,000 years old. And then our species as a larger family, in terms of like, let's go all the way back. Our species is a larger family going way, way back to right about here. We're talking about Australopithecine. We're talking about 6 million years ago. 6 million years. So let's take our whole ancestral history, our whole evolutionary history, during which we evolved certain nutritional dependencies and we evolved certain food processing capabilities. That whole process has taken about 6 million years. And it looks like for a species like ours, with an evolutionary velocity like ours, it takes about 1 million years to actually change our nutritional requirements and our ability to process foods. 1 million years. So ancient wisdom from 400 years ago, or from 4,000 years ago, or from 3,000 years ago is not actually all that ancient. It's just about as recent as what the FDA is telling us today. Now, I'm not saying there isn't some wisdom in those observations from the past. What I'm saying is that our evolutionary history is very, very long relative to a short period of time where we've been getting it wrong. Dairy products probably entered human consumption about 10,000 years ago, something like that. If I remember correctly, there was a guy named Paul Evershed who worked, I think, at the University of Liverpool, and he discovered the first evidence of milk proteins on pottery at around about 6,000 years ago, something like that. It's an incredibly new behavior. It's a very new behavior. And as a consequence of that incredibly new behavior, there are a small percentage of people, it's something like 70% of Caucasians and 10% of non-Caucasians, that are not lactose intolerant. So they're like, well, it means that it's okay for me to have milk. No, what it means is that your alarm system is defective. What it means is that the very first hurdle in being able to process milk is to overcome lactose, because lactose is the milk sugar that we cannot digest if we're not making lactase anymore. And most mammals stop producing lactase, the enzyme, once their teeth come in. And so they can't break down lactose, hence lactose intolerance. Yet there are a few humans on this planet that have one small genetic modification, I believe it's on chromosome 2, that allows them to continue to produce lactase after their teeth come in, and so they can break down lactose. So they don't get stomach pains, they don't get diarrhea from drinking milk. But you know what they still do get? According to Harvard Nurses School, they have, with 1 glass of milk a day or equivalent cheese or even calcium supplements for that matter, just that equivalent amount of not properly digested calcium coming in largely from dairy products, you're talking about a 300% increase in the likelihood of developing prostate cancer or ovarian cancer, regardless of whether you're lactose intolerant. Lactose intolerance is just the alarm system. If you're not lactose intolerant, you don't have the alarm. So why, again, am I sharing this with you? I'm sharing this with you because I want you to consume with awareness. I want you to notice the advertising and notice what they're saying versus what's true. And I want you to weigh that stuff up and then eat these things knowing this stuff so you can really notice the way it makes you feel. All right? Enough on dairy products for now. And if you're tempted to drop out dairy products at this point, you must not. There will come a time when that's appropriate, but right now, have it and have it consciously. The key message here is keep doing what you're doing. Again, your diet right now should largely be as it was pre the Wild Fit Challenge, with the additions of fruit in the morning, your alkalizers, the increased vegetable intake, both quantity and quality, and a focus on improving the quality of the proteins you're taking in. And of course, drinking water and doing your breathing exercises. Otherwise, if you would normally have had a hamburger, go have the hamburger. If you would normally have had pizza, have the pizza. If you would normally have had double frosted, double chocolate bomb cake with ice cream, then go ahead and have that. If you're normally drinking Coca-Cola, you should have that. If you're normally having coffee, you should have that. I've not asked you to remove any of those things. Stick with it. Again, pay attention to your dialogue, pay attention to the way you feel. And one last thing. Really, really now, pay attention to how the food is making you feel. Like really. Now, as your consciousness and your awareness is getting stronger and stronger, really notice. Pay attention. Does it taste as good as you thought it was going to taste? Does the second bite taste as good as the first bite? How do you feel half an hour later? Really get in and play the game. And I'll see you tomorrow.